Yeah, our second to last speaker, Stephanie, she works at DigitalOcean. Well, she's going to tell you a little bit about herself, so I won't put in too much. But what she's going to talk about is we're going to get right down to the fundamental units of what we're working with. And we've heard a lot today about visual design. We've heard a lot today about behavior and JavaScript. But getting right down to the atomic units, we're going to be dealing with words 99% of the time on the web. And so Stephanie's going to talk to us about words. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephanie Morillo.
All right. Can everyone hear me? First thing first, I don't use slides, but 20 minutes ago I did tweet, and you can look at it on the hashtag, a list of resources that you can use after my talk, and a lot of those principles I am going to be covering over the next 20 minutes. So I am Stephanie Morillo. I am a copywriter from New York City, and I've been writing professionally for my entire career. And I'm here to talk to you about something that's very near and dear to me, something that I consider to be the unsung hero of the user experience, and that is copy. Now, copy is something that is seldom understood by people in our industry, I think for a few reasons. For one, copy is often confused for content. I'm going to talk a little bit about what copy is, but content in particular is meant to engage the audience. It's meant to initiate a conversation with the audience, and that can happen across different mediums. Writing is one of them, but it can also extend to video, audio, etc. Secondly, as a result of content and copy being seen as the same thing, copy is only seen as marketing-driven, salesy, so to speak. But in fact, copy extends beyond that. Copy touches the very products that we build and we work on. Have you found yourself creating a form field, and you're asking people to choose a username or to choose a strong password? That's text, that's copy. If you're asking people to create an account, how they can update an account, delete an account, that's all copy, that's all text. And thirdly, not every startup or organization has a dedicated copywriter on staff. Sometimes some companies will have a contractor that they're working with, so they'll outsource their copy. And in other cases, copy is divvied up among different teams. So sometimes you'll see user experience designers being tasked with writing the copy that accompanies their designs. Sometimes you'll see product managers having to create the copy that's going to live on the user interface. And other times you'll see marketers that touch all kinds of copy, so articles, blog posts, they'll write the social media copy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So today, in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to go over a few things with you. For one, I'm going to define copywriting, and I'm going to provide examples of different forms of copy, for not all writing is equal. Secondly, I'm going to describe what a copywriter does. Thirdly, I'll go briefly over some principles of good copywriting. I'm not going to be talking about the mechanics of writing, so don't worry, there's not going to be any mention of grammar or syntax. And lastly, I'm going to discuss the copywriting process with you, which I hope will help you if you are a non-writer and you're tasked with writing your own copy, or if you find yourself working with a copywriter on staff. So part one, what is copywriting? I get this question all the time, and to be honest, it hasn't always been easy to answer that question. I usually defer to what I do. So I consulted with the Googles, and I found a great definition that I'll share with you right now. Copywriting is the art and science of strategically delivering words, whether written or spoken, that get people to take some form of action. So essentially, you're crafting messaging that has information on it that will then prompt your users to do something. If we think about this from a marketing point of view, it's very easy, right? You'll write a landing page, maybe because you want to collect email addresses. You want people to sign up for your newsletter. Or you'll create a landing page to promote your application because you want people to download and use your mobile app. Or you'll find sometimes they'll want you to share this page with your friends on Twitter. That's from a marketing point of view. But you can also get your users to take action by using your product. So things like create a username, choose a username, guiding your user with words through the user interface. So you're essentially telling them all of the information they need to do things like to build a dashboard that does monitoring, to creating an account for managing campaigns, those kinds of things. So copy touches marketing and it touches product, and ultimately there's more than one kind of action your user can take. So that leads us into copy types. Copy types can typically fall under two buckets. You'll have long-form copy and short-form copy. And they more or less do exactly what it sounds like. Long-form copy includes things like blog posts, your articles, your one-pagers, your white papers, your email campaigns, so your newsletters, all of that stuff. And your website copy, so the actual landing pages that they hit, your home page, your pricing page, your features page, all of that is long-form copy. And short-form copy includes social media posts. It includes ads, which are both print and online, and of course, UI microcopy. So this can include, for example, SMS alerts that you send to your users when something is going wrong, or if you're sending a verification code, or if you're asking them to confirm or cancel. That is text that would fall under short-form copy. And similarly, whenever you create a prompt for a form field, your name, your address, etc., all of that is short-form copy. There are specific types of copy that you will see that do not fall under the purview of a copywriter. Two examples that come to mind are legal copy, so your terms of service, your privacy policy. That's typically drafted by somebody who, legal counsel, an attorney, that kind of thing. And secondly, technical documentation, so your API docs. Oftentimes, engineers will write that, technical writer will write that, sometimes a combination of the two. So, what do copywriters do? It seems really easy, right? All we have to do is write. Well, that's part of it. The first part is that copywriters have to do research. Copywriters are not always subject matter experts in the topics that they are writing about. So sometimes you'll go onto a website and maybe the target audience is highly technical people, something like a cloud computing platform like DigitalOcean. These are very, very highly technical people. They understand certain concepts, they use certain terms, but the person writing that copy is going to be working with other stakeholders in order to make sure that that messaging is accurate. So that's what a copywriter does. A copywriter interviews stakeholders, they talk to people in the company, they do independent research, they have an understanding of who the audience is, they have an understanding of the brand tone of voice, and they also understand what the value proposition of the products are. They write, and they edit, and they proofread across different mediums, and basically copy that falls under those two buckets, long-form copy and short-form copy that I mentioned earlier. So here are some guiding principles to help you think, to basically put you in the mind of a copywriter. I'm not going to talk again about the mechanics of writing, but I am going to talk about some guiding principles and elements that copywriters always have to think about when they're attacking copy. So number one, who is our audience? That seems simple enough. Number two, brand tone of voice. And thirdly, general style. The first part seems easy enough, especially if you work in a company and you have a fundamental understanding of the product. Who is our audience? Who are they generally? Who are specific segments of our audience? You'll find that even though you have a general understanding of your audience, sometimes you want to target different segments for different reasons. Maybe there's a feature that's only going to affect users that live in a certain metro. Maybe you want to craft an email, or you want to pitch a product, or you want people to know something about it, and you're going to target people of a certain demographic group. It's really important to know that you're not always your users, and I'll give you an example. Last year, I used to work at a company that has a presence here in London. It's called General Assembly, and we're headquartered in New York City. It's an ed tech company. And General Assembly's marketing department is also in New York City. And while I was there, I was tasked with writing emails that would go to all of our metros. At that time, General Assembly had about 10 domestic in the US metros and 5 international metros. All of the people on the marketing team were American. Now, it wasn't a problem to adhere to the company style of being pithy, culturally relevant, using idiomatic expressions and such when it came to talking to the US audiences. But we found that a lot of the content that we created for our international audiences didn't always stick, and we would have to consult with our colleagues in Australia and Britain, and of course, we had markets in Southeast Asia as well that all had different expressions. For one thing, British spelling, which for us, we didn't think about, but obviously that's something that's extraordinarily important if you're going to be talking to that market. So it's really important to know who your users are and what segment of your audience you're talking to. Secondly is brand tone of voice. Now this one is a little tricky. For one, brand tone of voice is not what you say, it's how you say it. So if you go on Twitter and you can think of a few brands, you can think of Slack or Trello or Asana, and you'll notice that they all have a certain voice, a certain personality in their tweets. And their personalities don't always match. What is important is what goes into creating a good brand tone of voice is knowledge of your audience, but also understanding your brand's values. Are you cheerful? Are you enthusiastic? Are you informative? Are you extroverted? Are you excited, et cetera? And this will be a combination of different characteristics, but these characteristics you always have to think about to ensure that you're on brand with your messaging. And the last part is copywriting general style. If you remember anything about general style, just remember these 3 things. Copy should aim to be clear, concise, and consistent. It's really easy to default to salesy copy that most people don't really like by using superfluous words or phrases or focusing too much on how they sound, trying to beef something up, when in fact you should take away more than you add on. If a word or a phrase or a sentence does not add any value to what you're saying and detracts from the impact of what you're saying, or even worse, it'll confuse your users, take it out. It's not necessary. Consistency deals with using things like word usage. So if you think about like the word back end and front end, there are many different ways of spelling that out. You can write them as one word, as 2 words, or as a hyphenated word. But whichever word usage you decide for that term or for those terms, stick to it. You don't want an entire paragraph that has front end as 1 word and another paragraph that has it as 2 words. The same thing with your headings. Headings, call to action buttons, and links. Are we going to use title casing or sentence casing? Are we going to bold certain things? It might sound very irrelevant, but I guarantee you that consistency is key because consistency adds to your credibility. Think about when you receive a CV from a potential candidate and it's littered with typos and errors and you don't really know what they're talking about. The first thing you're going to do is probably chuck that away. You're going to assume that that person isn't professional, that if they didn't take the time to go through their CV, how are you going to know that they're going to pay attention to detail for whatever the role it is that requires? So making sure that your copy is consistent is crucial to maintaining that credibility. And the last part to this is copywriting as a process. So now you have a basic idea of what different types of copy are. So how do we get started? What's the first step? The first step is actually front-loading information. Whether you, as a non-writer, are writing the copy or you're working with a copywriter, it's important that you front-load all of this information because a copywriter crafts messaging. They do not create information out of thin air. This is really, really important. I'll get people asking me, hey, can you write an email to our customers that talks about this new product that we're launching? Or can you create an email that tells our customers that one of the data centers is going to go down? I've never had to do that, but you get my drift. Well, I'm going to ask, when is this going to happen? Which users are we sending this to? How long is this going to be? Et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be a back and forth until I, as a copywriter, have all of the information I need to get started. So how do you do this? One thing that you can do, and I actually have a link to this in the link that I provided that I tweeted out. I'll tweet it out again. It's called a creative brief. And a creative brief is like a 1 to 2 page document of intent that answers a few questions, like what is the purpose of this project or campaign? Who in our company is working on this project or campaign? Who is our audience? What is the value proposition? What mediums is this writing going to be produced in? Are we writing email, blog, tweets, etc.? How do we measure success? And more importantly, what information do I have at my disposal? Do I have a mock-up, a wireframe, a demo to look at? Do I have examples from other companies of what we think it's going to look like? Do we have templates that we've used, interviews with stakeholders? Give me the what, the information, the meat, meeting notes, that kind of thing. So once you have that, you can get started on working with your team to create copy. Now you have a draft, right? What's the next step after your draft? Typically, there's going to be a copy review process. And if you pay attention to anything, pay attention to this part. So Erykah Badu once said, keep in mind, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit, and that is so true when it comes to writing. There's nothing worse than having many cooks in the kitchen come in and review your work when they haven't been involved in the project, they don't understand what the purpose is, and what you get is a whole bunch of littered comments that don't really lead to anything. So in order to avoid this, I would recommend that you assign reviewers. You have specific members in your team that are tasked with reviewing one thing and one thing only. Reviewer A might have to check the draft for technical accuracy. Reviewer B is going to go in and make sure that our value proposition is aligned in the messaging. And maybe reviewer C is going to be the person editing and doing all the proofreading and all that stuff. And then finally, have one person who has the final say and can sign off. And I have one final note for designers. So this is my gift to you, designers, designer friends. Designers, so a story factors a lot into how you create a design. You already talk about this story, you're working with your team, and essentially you're trying to communicate a story. What I recommend is that you use real copy. Don't use dummy text. Don't use lorem ipsum text, and I'll tell you why. It's really important to get a holistic view of how the text and the design work off of each other when it comes to telling a story. And the lorem ipsum, all it does is detract your attention away from the copy, from the information that the users are going to be reading, and instead focusing it on the visual elements. But if you take a stab at writing your own copy, and it doesn't have to be pretty, the goal of it is not to sound as close to what a copywriter will do as possible. In fact, you can take existing copy from your websites or whatever assets and materials you have and use that as your dummy text. But the point of it is for you to get a better feel in the story. Does the design serve the story right now? Does it help the content shine through? Does it augment the copy? And secondly, it'll give you a better idea of how much room a copywriter actually needs to write copy. So if you create a beautiful design and you're going to have a blurb and a header, and it only has 3 words of dummy text and 2 lines of 5 words each, and then followed by a link, and you're only giving the copywriter 4 words, they might come back to you and say, you know what, this looks really pretty, but it's going to take me more than 2 to 3 words to write a good header. I'm going to need 5. I'm going to need 3 lines of copy, of sub-copy, and I'm going to need a little bit more for the link. So it's really important because it helps you see the story for yourself in a holistic manner, and it also helps you frame that story and that messaging with the copywriter. So the last thing that I want to conclude with is there's a lot more thought to copy than just words on a page. Copywriting is very strategic. There are elements of copy, like when it comes to consistency and general style, that depend on design. But ultimately, the purpose of copy is to inform and help your users take action, whatever action it is that you see fit. So I created a short list, and I'm going to tweet it shortly again for those of you who are interested. There are going to be a few links in there. One is for exploring guidelines for writing on the web, and it even includes a link for like writing a really good README. Another one is going to be a guide for crafting a brand tone of voice. And lastly, a blog post that I wrote that's kind of like a short condensed version of this talk that includes a sample copy brief that you can use yourself and you can tailor for your own purposes. And if you want the link now, it's just bit.ly/copy resources. And that's all for me. If you have any questions about copywriting, I'll be at the Q&A and you can tweet me. Thank you.